So, I have seen a lot of people argue about this quite significantly. I am not planning on doing that, but there is this cycle. Some economists deny, some don't. Some people claim it's a natural symptom of capitalism, and some people say it's just the harsh reality of the rich requiring poor to feed upon. Like, there's a lot of stuff that gets said about it. I don't think it has to be anything quite so severe or extremist. I think those things are clickbait, and in reality, the cycle of every decade-ish or so of basically us going into some sort of recession or pullback, I feel like is actually pretty natural, and people view it as like this proof that the system is broken. There are a lot of things that prove the system are broken. It doesn't need this proof-er thing added on. The system is broken for a menagerie of reasons. Making up reasons isn't necessary. In reality, when you look at like nature, you look at human anatomy, you look at almost anything that there is, it is very natural for there to be times of activity and times of a break. Sometimes the market is a bull market and it's pushing forward, and sometimes it's not. The bear market and it's pulling back. You see animals go into hibernation. You see trees drop their leaves. You see the ocean currents going in a big loop. It makes total logical sense that a financial system, if it was actually a functioning system, would have times of growth and times of pullback. Now, corporations wanting there to only ever be growth and shareholders have to always have growth in their pockets, that's more systems broken, because it's not natural. We as human beings, we need times of activity, but we also need rest. And it is 100% natural to experience both things as a human being. It is 100% natural for a system to need to recuperate itself, to have a time of rejuvenating. That's totally normal. Is some of that engineered or taken advantage of by certain people with the wealth and the resources to do so? Sure. But is that it happens in the first place because of that? I don't think so. And there are some economists who will argue that what I'm saying is totally correct, and there are some economists who will say, that's, you don't know what you're saying, and that's fine. I just don't see that in particular as being a good argument against capitalism. Capitalism has so many flaws, and people don't like to look at them because they want to think capitalism's the best system there is. Like, what's the other options? They don't compare. And that's not necessarily true either. Capitalism likes to be on top, and so it kind of diminishes other ones. But there are other systems that exist, and they don't have to be capitalism, and capitalism isn't even necessarily the best system. It's just the one that we have, and that has globally stretched its fingers out. Capitalism has enough flaws that you don't need to go looking for them. Capitalism's flaws are actually very obvious to 85% of people on the planet. The big issue that I find with doing things like saying, oh, the cycle of recession is like this big proof that capitalism is bad, is it detracts from the very real and far more impacting and far-reaching issues that are problems, and makes you less likely to do something about it. If something happens on a recurring habitual basis, it kind of seems inevitable. So why are you even focusing on that when it's pretty natural to the natural world for there to be times of rest and times of not rest? Focus on actual problems so that we can address actual problems, and they also seem less overwhelmingly daunting to overcome because they're not just gonna keep inevitably occurring. It's self-defeatist to go looking for this to be such a big flaw and to be catastrophizing it. It doesn't have to be a catastrophe. Yes, there are people who take advantage of that cycle, but the cycle itself is pretty average, normal, not that big of a deal. It can feel like a big deal when you're one of the, again, 85% of the human population on the planet who has to deal with the repercussions of it, and it sucks. But that it's actually happening isn't necessarily the point. It's who's being harmed by it the most. I firmly believe that a financial system is only as good as whoever has the least is getting good. The quality of life of the person who is most destitute within that financial system is the marker for success of that system, in my opinion. So the system definitely needs fixing. It's definitely broken, because the people who are most destitute are destitute beyond the ability to survive. But let's focus on things that have actual solutions and that we can actually do something about. I don't like posturing. I like actionable, resolvable solutions. Talking nonsense about overcoming something that naturally occurs in nature is it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. So people who complain about the recessions that come through or put up graphs and they're like, look, you can see on the line chart, it goes up and down, up and down. Congratulations, you know how to manipulate Excel. Yay, you can make a graph. That's all that means. In actuality, it's so natural for there to be cycles of growth and not growth. What I consider to be actually one of the biggest flaws in capitalism is that it thinks that it infinitely has to consume resources when we live in a finite world. There aren't infinite resources. It infinitely has to keep growing. The corporations have to keep growing. The shareholders' pockets have to keep getting built up. When that's just not natural. That's far more something to address. That's something we could actually do something about. It's actually very natural for there to be times when profit margins are just not going to be as big. And that should be okay. When people can't afford to get as much. And that should be okay. When finances act like an organism instead of acting like some robot. Because it is a system. And systems have cycles. Whether it's a weather system, whether it's a current system, whether it's the seasons, whatever, your circulatory system inside your own body, your circadian rhythm, like seriously, everything has that same kind of natural cycle. So stop focusing on the cycle.